Iran has launched missiles at U.S. air bases in Qatar and Iraq in response to strikes on its nuclear sites on Saturday. Explosions have been heard in Doha after a credible threat of an Iranian missile attack on a U.S.-run airbase in Qatar. Qatar has temporarily closed its airspace, and U.S. and U.K. citizens, as well as Nigerians, have been advised to shelter in place. President Trump is attending, as we speak, a National Security Council meeting. We're now hearing from the Iranians saying that Iran has launched a mighty and victorious response to U.S. strikes. The statements coming from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard saying Iran's message to the White House and its allies is clear and explicit, and that Iran will not leave any attack on its territorial integrity, sovereignty, and national security unanswered under any circumstances. Once again, pictures you're looking at there of Doha in Qatar, where Iran has launched missiles at U.S. air bases, not just in Qatar, but also in Iraq in response to strikes on its nuclear sites on Saturday. And we will be bringing you more on that developing story as it comes through. Meanwhile, staying with this Iranian-Israeli-U.S. development, Donald Trump has raised the prospect of toppling the Iranian leadership, apparently contradicting senior members of his administration. Writing on social media, Mr. Trump asked why there shouldn't be regime change if the current government was unable, in his words, to make Iran great again. Correspondents say there is a divide in Republican politics over whether or not the U.S. should get involved in trying to destroy Iran's nuclear program. They say the fact that President Trump campaigned on a promise to keep the U.S. out of foreign wars and regime change appears to be causing considerable disquiet among his supporters. Meanwhile, the French foreign minister has said his country opposes any attempt to force regime change in Iran. Jean-Noël Barrot was speaking ahead of a meeting of European Union foreign ministers. He said Iranians had to decide such things for themselves. In a minute, we'll be getting analysis of all these stories, but just to remind you of the story that broke a few minutes ago, that Iran has launched missiles at U.S. air bases in Qatar and in Iraq in response to strikes on its nuclear sites on Saturday. Arise News has verified that report, and you're looking at pictures of some of the activity over the airspace of Qatar at the moment. Qatar confirms the attack on the US-run Al Udeid base, calling it a flagrant violation and saying Qatar, reserves the right to respond directly. The country has now temporarily closed its airspace, and US and UK citizens have been advised to shelter in place, as have Nigerians who are in that country. Well, for more on these stories, let's go straight away now to the international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek, who joins me on the line from London. Good to see you, Dr. Laskiewicz. What do you make of this retaliation from Iran, which has now been confirmed? They've attacked the US air bases in Qatar and Iraq.
Well, there was some doubt, of course, yesterday what Iran would do, whether it would overlook the American attack and concentrate solely on Israel. But it's quite clear today that is not the case. Iran is going to take on America as well. And this means that there is no opportunity in the immediate future for diplomacy. This means also that Iran will probably back out of having international inspectors visit its sites, and will probably carry on making further actions such as closing the straits, which carries a great deal of oil, of course, ships. And in general, in one word, this is now a war.
Well, indeed it is. And I wonder what you make of Qatar saying that it reserves the right to retaliate. So it's not just the US and Israel, I mean, potentially, could be developed from just being Israel and the US versus Iran to pulling in other countries in the region.
I doubt whether other nations will really want to get involved. Qatar has to say something, obviously, if anything, if only just to preserve its sense of national pride. But I honestly doubt Qatar is going to do anything militarily. Rather, the question is, what will America do now? Interestingly, last week, America refused to rule out the use of nuclear weapons, and President Donald Trump is not noted for his moderation. And therefore, the double worry is not only will America now use more force against Iran, but whether it might escalate. In my books, actually, pointed out that although Russia was probably the first to use nuclear weapons, you cannot rule out America. And I'm afraid here, this may well happen. What is undoubtedly going to be the case is America will now carry on attacking Iran, which means that Iran will face this double threat. However, now comes the other aspect, Russia. Russia, as like America had a choice, like Iran, and what Russia is seemingly doing is going towards becoming Iran's ally, which may involve supplying it with the sort of missiles that will be able to prevent at least some of the Israeli and presumably more American airstrikes.
And it's interesting that you mention Russia there, because, of course, although the strategic agreement that Russia has with Iran does not include military support, but we do know that the Iranians have been supplying the Russians with drones, which they've been using in Ukraine, and so it is quite possible that they, in support of what you're saying, that the Russians might feel duty bound to supply the Iranians with some defensive weaponry there. But I mean, what you're saying reminded me of your books, but beyond your books, the fact that we're talking about Russia, we're talking about the US, we're talking about Israel and other countries in the Middle East, Iran, of course. I wonder if you can put it all into context for us. Is it very difficult to underestimate what a big moment this is? Is it a seismic moment?
It is an important moment. It's as important as the invasion of Ukraine 3 years ago. It is the moment when America has come in, and there is no question now that America will not stop with its initial strikes, because there's no question that Iran will sue for peace. The entire plan by President Donald Trump, as far as one could see one, is that a quick strike and Iran will be at the negotiating table begging for peace. That has gone. We're in a long war. It is yet to be seen what will happen. The key point is, in such a war, whether Iran can be invaded or not to actually stop the war, because if not, then it's a type of forever war in its way. The key aspect of Russia is that Russia had a choice of either staying on America's side, because after all, Russian-American relations have been very good, or to go with siding against America. And it would appear Russia's going in that way. Sooner or later, therefore, there may well be a confrontation, because if Russia supplies missiles, and that will be the key question, whether it will do so, then from that point onwards, we're heading for a real confrontation. In other words, World War III.
Indeed, and to further buttress that point, the sort of the Russian connection, if you like, we're hearing leading Russian politicians such as the former Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev saying that this could be the first shot of World War III, something that Donald Trump would not want, certainly not want on his record. I mean, we've also seen strong condemnation from China and Turkey, and of course France earlier today. So unless Mr. Trump says, let's stop right here, right now, and not be drawn into further conflict, does it throw so much up in the air?
Yes, I don't really think President Donald Trump can, politically speaking, now stop. There are three aspects to it. Were he suddenly to attempt to stop, he might well lose his position, because the implication would be he made a huge mistake recently bombing Iran. Secondly, number two, there's no implication that he wants to stop. After all, he went in to help Israel, and he had thought out what he wanted to do, and therefore there is, I think, no chance of him stopping. And thirdly, to be quite honest, Iran has made it quite clear there is no diplomatic possibility of a solution at present. So therefore, no, the war will continue. There's no question of it stopping. The point is, and here is a further aspect of its escalation, is that Iran has, so to speak, people, at very least, not on America's side, if not wholly on her side. France and China have condemned this. This is very important, especially France. Please note, Europe, according to President Donald Trump, has no place in mediating anything. Europe can be ignored. And Europe suddenly, because France is one of the key three nations of Europe, has spoken out condemning this attack. It is doubtful that Europe will actually do anything militarily to help Iran. I think that's virtually zero chance. But the very fact that America is now operating without any sort of diplomatic support is very significant. In the long run, the lack of help from other nations in the Vietnam War was one of the reasons why America lost it. So having France and China is obviously known, against her diplomatically, means that America actually does not have an immediate outright win on its side. Hence, what I was saying about nukes might be an attempt to bring Iran to its knees, because short of some sort of dramatic act, Iran can fight them for some time, especially if Russia were to help.
And I mean, you've been following not just the Middle East, but across Europe and the world, all the developments there, which is what makes you a very good international affairs analyst. Do you think there were better ways to do this? Because, of course, in 2015, Barack Obama negotiated the JCPOA, which essentially contained Iran's nuclear program, but which Donald Trump pulled out of, and which led to an increase in Iran's uranium enrichment.
Quite so. The fact of the matter is that Donald Trump has eschewed a diplomatic solution, gone so far as to tear up the one that was in place, and the consequences in part are directly his fault. Now, of course, we're in the situation where things are escalating, but there always was a different way of going about things. Even in the strike on Iran, had Israel and America wanted international support, I think it would have been forthcoming. As a result, the strikes would have been more mitigated, may have been less successful, but would have had more support. As it stands, Israel and America are somewhat isolated in this respect. It remains to be seen what Great Britain and Germany do, but Great Britain has indicated it wishes to stay neutral as far as one can tell. And therefore, it could have been done, A, much better in the past diplomatically, and B, even recently, in trying to secure world support to come to a diplomatic solution before. As it is, it's simply one attack after another.
And looking at Iran, of course, and just reiterating that news that's breaking a minute ago, that it's launched retaliatory attacks on US bases in Qatar as well as Iraq. I mean, beyond sort of a lot of the verbiage that we've heard coming from them pushing back on that US attack and now this retaliation, the supreme leader now sheltering in a bunker, and the assessment seems to be that if he does too little, he loses faith, and if he does too much, he loses everything. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, unfortunately, these are Western analyses, which, if you follow them for long enough, you realize there's a common thread to this. You see, the same was said of Putin. He was ill, he was out, he was finished. 3 years on, none of this is true, and it never was. For a start, Iran is an Asian country with a far different timescale to the one that the Americans, for a start, operate on. For Iran has been around since literally Greek times and probably before. And so what I'm stating by this is it'll take more than just a few decisions to suddenly make Khomeini a less revered or a less obeyed figure, just as with Putin. Rather, it is the question of what many Iranians think that should or should not happen. And this is by no means clear because the West plays the same game, if you like, in its propaganda it plays with Russia. It focuses on a handful of dissidents and not on the average person. Therefore, in my opinion, this is overstated. I doubt there will be an immediate change in government. The business of regime change is this sort of American idea that knocking down any government they don't like is tantamount to, of course, at the same time making deals that are advantageous to them, which many countries have complained about over the last few decades. And this is just one more aspect of this in that sense. And because many other countries know this, I don't think it's going to be a change in the way you're suggesting as quickly as possible. Moreover, very important point, were he to die tomorrow, the succession, in other words, who runs the country immediately, which is the revolutionary army, of course, will be in charge. They'll pick someone else. Iran's not going to topple straight away just because the Americans wish it to.
Dr. Laskiewicz, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is the International Affairs Analyst who was talking to me on the line from London.